the LA Rams, who overcame some first half struggles in 2023 to go 7-1 in the second half of that season. And while they lost their only playoff game to the Detroit Lions in a homecoming of sorts for Matthew Stafford, they put up a fight. They almost beat them. They almost upset them, but unfortunately, a mistake or two cost them their season. So going into 2024, with this balance of veteran presence and young players, you want to reclaim the NFC West division. And with looking at some of their moves, they certainly can make a case for that. But some of the things that I felt like they needed to address this offseason if they wanted to do such, well, they had to retool that defense, especially considering the move that happened this past offseason. And another move that I felt like wasn't too necessary, but I felt like you want to start considering was finding a young quarterback to groom behind Matthew Stafford once that time came, especially considering that, they drafted Stetson Bennett last year, but there were some events that happened where he left the team and Sean McVay wasn't sure if it was going to come back. So in the event that Stetson Bennett doesn't come back, if he hasn't already, then I was hoping that the Rams would have found a quarterback behind that they were going to groom behind Matthew Stafford, but we were going to see if they were going to do that. So looking at some of their key offseason events for the Rams, they did lose their defensive coordinator, Raheem Morris, as he became the new head coach for the Atlanta Falcons, replacing Arthur Smith, and he took some of McVay's staff with them. So they had to go find a new defensive coordinator, and which the Rams did. And they also re-signed one of their key guards, Kevin Dotson, so he's going to get a new running mate by the name of Jonah Jackson as we transition to the Rams additions in free agency. So the Rams beef up their offensive line, the interior, which was kind of a problematic area in 2023, but shouldn't be much of an issue going into this coming year, especially when you get Jonah one of the top guards in the NFL with Jackson, and now you pair him up with Kevin Dotson. Boom, there you go. Beefing up that protection for Matthew Stafford. Defensively, you look at corners Tre'Davious White and Darius Williams, the newest additions for the Rams. Darius Williams returns to LA after a tenure in Jacksonville. And safety Cameron Curl for the Commanders. He player for that Commanders defense. And I feel like safety was kind of an issue for Los Angeles in the last few years, but getting Cameron Curl should be an upgrade for them. And a little bit of a surprise addition to the team, a name that certain fans should be familiar with of my team, Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo comes over from the Las Vegas Raiders, who released him, and Jimmy G is suspended 2 games for violating I'm not sure, it was like performance enhancing drugs, a policy on that. Yeah, interesting. Jimmy G comes over to the Raiders, not to the Raiders, the Rams. Huh? What about that, huh? But probably the other big piece of events that happened this past offseason was Aaron Donald announcing his retirement. One of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. He announced his retirement, and probably his long song came 2 years ago at the Super Bowl, being a key part of that in flustering Joe Burrow. And probably, outside of Cooper Kupp, he was the Super Bowl MVP in that game. And then they also lost Brian Allen to the Cleveland Browns. So, they already, I'm pretty sure that they already replaced him with this draft. But with the draft, they pretty much beefed up their defense, getting edge rusher Jared Verse from Florida State, and also from Florida State, Braden Fisk. So that defensive line is already looking beefy. And they also got another safety, Cameron Kirchens from the University of Miami. They also got another edge rusher from Brendan Jackson. And just in the event that their top running back gets injured, Blake Comron. So for the Rams, going into this season, their offensive line is already looking like one of the best. So pretty much their trenches is going to be one of the best. Take that back. They're both sides of the lines could be one of the best. Could be really good, especially that offensive line, because it was improved last year, but there's, like I said, there are issues within the interior. Especially when you look at last year, left tackle Alaric Johnson broke out as a strong protector for Stafford. And And second-year guard Steve Avila, he's going to move to center. He was pretty good, but that interior had some issues. But now that you have Kevin Dotson, you already re-signed Kevin Dotson, and now you bring over Jonah Jackson from the Lions. He does come up with some injury history, but I feel like with those guys now beefing up the offensive line, I feel like it'll be much better. And then defensively, you got a really good core with how many players you got in the draft at edge rusher, and then addressing Aaron Donald's retirement by getting Braden Fisk, who looks really good. I feel like the Rams in the trenches are going to be really good, especially considering that you already got Ernest Jones in there. So should be an interesting front on both in the trenches for both sides of the ball for LA. But their special teams does remain a concern because they had kicking issues all year last year with controversial kicker Brett Maher. And I don't mean like off field, but on field, he was really bad for the Cowboys. And that carried over when he came to LA. And in their lone playoff game, he had some kicking issues as well. So they took the route with drafting a sixth round kicker. While it is sensible, they just better hope that Josh Carty is going to perform well in actual game time action, especially in those clutch situations. So looking at their schedule, looking at some of their key games that are going to be pivotal for them, right off the bat, you're facing the Detroit Lions in Detroit in a rematch of that wild card game. Interesting. Interesting the NFL scheduled that, and on Sunday night too. That should be a lot of fun. Like Matthew Stafford immediately returning back to Detroit, like several months later, from that playoff game, and then you go right back to Detroit in week 1. Love it from the NFL. And then I normally say there's one game, but it's both games against the San Francisco 49ers because probably their biggest competition within the division. So week 3 and week 15, those are going to be pivotal games if you want to try snatching the division from San Francisco. And then some competition outside the conference against the Miami Dolphins in week 10. And then probably a pivotal game in week 12 against the Philadelphia Eagles 2 weeks later. So for the Rams, like how is those defensive additions? Like I know I've been like kind of giving my praises a little for those Rams, that Rams defense, but you know, obviously it's going to be how they translate that on the field. So they should be better. But again, it doesn't automatically mean they'll be good once they step on the field. Like I like the moves that they made, especially within the trenches. But when it comes to the secondary, I mean, it should be good. It should be good too. But Tre'Davious White does have some injury history. He's got to stay healthy. And with Darius Williams, he's back, but he has to adjust to a new defensive coordinator. So offensively, how will the young receivers follow up last year's breakout surge? Because Puka Nacua, he surprised everyone, but everyone's going to be ready for him now. And then you got other receivers like DeMarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell. They've been reliable options too to help ease off the pressure off Puka and Cooper Kupp. But now that they got a full season under their belts, there's going to be room for opportunity. That trio can be even better as long as they stay that way to form a strong quartet alongside Cooper Kupp, who has had some issues staying healthy this last year. So for the Rams, they were already loaded up with a roster that had emerging youngsters like Nacua, Byron Young, Ernest Jones, and Kyron Williams. And the list goes on and on for LA. And they added on it even further with all these biggest needs that they had to add, like the offensive line and the secondary. So as long as Matthew Stafford can stay healthy and these young players can keep exceeding everyone's expectations, I feel like the Rams have a pretty good shot in not just making the playoffs, but maybe snatching the NFC West division. And yeah, that's coming from me, a certain red and gold fan. But we'll see what happens in this upcoming season. But I feel like the Rams have a pretty good shot at going for more this coming season.